Yes, Let's Talk Call-In Radio. Getting to the root causes of the important issues of the day. This on the air community forum. That means you people. Believes your voice matters and welcomes all thoughts and views without judgment. Please join today's conversation by calling 415-663-8492. And sometimes you can tweet us, but I'm not going to do that today. Just call us, 8492 or 663-8317. And when you call, when you call in, just hang on until you hear me say you're on the air, and then give us your name. Turn down your radio, and please keep the language clean. We are governed by the FCC, and they frown on certain language, like French, for example. And joining me today is a very preoccupied Charles Schultz.
Oh, gracious. Hello. Pardon me.
A vital and vibrant Shelley Rugg.
Oh, thank you, Paul.
And a very, complacent-looking Stephen Hurwitz.
I just wish it would stop raining already.
And then there's Paul.
It's been raining for, 5 hours now?
A drizzle.
This year so far. Yes, and I'm Paul Raffel. And this is Let's Talk, and today we want to hear from our listeners. Whatever they know, whatever their experiences, whatever their opinions about dementia, including Alzheimer's, and its care and caregiving options, prevention, perhaps. Is there a way to prevent it?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I had...
Some say no, but others say yes.
Oh, well, we could start out with the lighthearted stuff. I think is a real problem. The administration has still not acknowledged Russian interference in dementia. And I don't know why we haven't heard more about that. The other thing is one of our wonderful neighbors here in the Creamery building said that they felt as though they were suffering from dementia after recent encounters with the local postal service. And I just wanted to acknowledge that. Although it did end up working out in the end. It just took a long time with the post office. So that aside, I had breakfast this morning with someone who had a parent with dementia. And so I sort of asked, okay, so what would you say to someone who's going to encounter the same thing as an adult child dealing with a parent who has dementia? And hopefully I can represent this well. One of the big things was when you have some awareness that this is what's happening to your parent, and they understand what's happening to them, to go through all kinds of different sort of preparations for a period of time in which they are not going to have the same awareness there. So it was dealing with questions about power of attorney, about having access to their bank accounts, to dealing with preparations for interactions with doctors and the sort of medical system that they're going to participate in, because that can become very difficult. Once dementia's gotten to a certain phase, if you haven't dealt with these questions, then the interactions with doctors can become very problematic. One encounter that was related to me, I don't know if this was from this person's experience or just, an idea, was they would ask, the doctor would ask the parent with dementia, will you allow your son to answer this question for you? And the parent would just say, no. It was, right. So that, that this didn't, make the, obviously the emotional side of dealing with somebody who is suffering from dementia easier, but all of the sort of practical questions, if you sort of tackle them at the beginning, then it's much easier to navigate that side of dealing with a parent with dementia.
Yeah, I had an experience with this with my dad when we realized, that he was losing his memory and his capacity to take care of his affairs. We looked for his trust and couldn't find it. And, of course, he couldn't find it. And so we had to have a new trust drawn up. And he had to be present at those meetings with the lawyers. And he had to sign the papers. And the lawyer drew up a trust document that needed to be read through and approved before it became finalized. And trying to go through that trust with my father, who insisted he must read every word, we get to pay first paragraph, first sentence, and he's asking questions. And I didn't always have the right answers, and he would get frustrated, and I would get frustrated. So I am so fortunate that he has a really good friend, a former student, who actually helps people at the end of their lives navigate, the hospital system, the medical system, and handling their affairs and all of that. So she helped, and what she did was she sat down with my father for 2 days in a row and went through that document page by page, and she said, here's the rule. Once you've read the page and understood it, we're going to write okay, and we will not go back. And she got him through that document. It took 2 days, but we were able to finally get him to sign it and move it through. Wow. One of the things for him was he didn't like the language in the document about becoming incapacitated. And somebody having to take over. He's always been so good at managing his life, and the idea that somehow he wouldn't be able to, he just couldn't fathom it, and he didn't like it. And so we really made an effort to put language in the trust. Well, it wasn't language. It was when that moment came when we could tell we needed to shift the trust. Right now we're co-trustees. Then it was easy for me to become the primary trustee when the time came. But we did have to get 2 letters from doctors saying, yes, he's incapacitated. But he didn't have to know about any of it. And so that was one of the things that we realized is at the beginning, we were like trying to get Dad involved.
Right.
Like we did some things on his house. Dad, which tiles do you like? And, really trying to get him involved. And it would always backfire on us, and we didn't understand why. And so there came a point when we just stopped asking him his permission or his opinion. How do you want to do it, or is that okay? We just started handling it. And he didn't notice. See, that's the thing, is he didn't notice he wasn't paying his bills anymore.
Sure.
You bring something up that my father had Alzheimer's, and they get very good at hiding it. In the beginning, there's just have all these ways of not letting you know that they're drifting into this place.
Really?
It's humiliating.
I've been hiding it for years.
Well,
Well, I mean, that humiliation a lot of people feel of losing your competence, losing your ability to
Exactly.
A lot of these people have been living independently, whatever, and now all of a sudden they're not able to do that. It can be terrifying. 663-8492.
And yes, my the warning sign that my dad finally realized that my mother had Alzheimer's was when she left the hot saucepan on the kitchen floor and on the vinyl flooring, and
Oh, boy.
burned a nice hole through the vinyl flooring. Oh dear, Joan. Yes, and then in my case, very sad for my father, because he was determined to look after my mother and do it all himself. Even though my brother and his wife were just down the road and they were always helping, but we were always trying to convince him that he needed more help than he was getting. The county nurse would come by now and again and sort of check on him. But no, in the end, it actually sort of killed him. Because he was losing so much energy. His energy levels was so down. He wasn't eating properly because he was taking care of her, and then had to go to hospital and got one of those hospital viruses, bacteria.
Yeah.
I guess it was a bacterium, and
Yes.
that did him in a year to the day before my mum died. She died on exactly the same day a year later, so that was
Wow.
But she was reduced to the point of just sitting in a chair and saying yes, yes.
Sorry, Shelley.
Well, I was just going to, it makes me think about medications. A lot of people with dementia are put on a litany of medications that are, I believe, the intention is to make it easier for the person with dementia to navigate their world or at least be more at ease with it. anti-anxiety medications, antidepressants. My feeling is that is a big contributor to the major shutdown that we see with a lot of people with dementia. I could be wrong, but I know with my dad, when I started noticing that something was wrong, the first thing that clued me in was I invited him over for dinner, and he made it to my house. And he sat down at the dinner table with us, and I served his food, and then he just sat there with his head kind of hanging down, not doing anything.
Yikes.
I said, "Dad, are you not hungry?" And he says, "No, not really." And I said, "Well, when did you last eat?" "Oh, I don't remember." And what struck me was not only that he didn't remember, but that it didn't disturb him that he couldn't remember when he last ate or what he ate. And so I started going with him to his doctor's appointments. Well, he really went downhill severely. It was he had trouble using his words, communicating things to other people, and likewise had trouble taking in language and really understanding it. And that was a big thing that I was noticing. I thought he was ready to die then. And he just was, head hanging down, no engagement in life, not eating, And so I started talking to the doctor about medications. And I said, what can we take away off of this list of meds? And, without fail, removing medications brought my dad back, made him more vibrant, brought his language back.
Well,
So he was given a painkiller that the label said as needed, but he was taking it every single night, hydrocodone.
Yeah.
He had a sleeping pill. It would make him walk in his sleep at night and eat really weird things like a whole bottle of oil.
Hey, can I ask a question,
boy.
by the way? It just reminds me. Would you be, would you take a test to find out if you had the genetic gene for Alzheimer's? They do have, you can test that now. Would you want to know if you are genetically predisposed?
I have the unfortunate death gene. I'm terrified to take the test.
Sure, if that were necessary, if I had thoughts about that. Yes.
Well, is there anything you can do, preventively? Would there be any value in that knowledge?
Do give us a call if you know any preventive ways.
I feel that the thing that did in my dad's brain, because I don't think my dad actually has Alzheimer's, which I think is something with plaque buildup on the brain. My dad's brain literally shrank. We did an MRI, and his brain, had gotten significantly smaller. And he has had a heart condition. He had open heart surgery and stents put in and all of the things that go along with having a heart condition, including all the medications. And one of them that's very common is anti-cholesterol medication.
Right.
Well, our brains are made of cholesterol.
Yep.
Yeah.
So this, just to bring it back to what you were saying earlier, Shelley, you were saying that a lot of the medications, whether they were related to dementia or not, you thought that they had when your father stopped using these medications, that had a beneficial.
Oh, absolutely.
Did you ever learn anything more about that? Are they like, other people with the same experience?
I went through this with my mother. She died at age 69, and she had dementia, but it was, in my opinion, psych med induced dementia.
Oh, interesting.
And she ended up dying because of a bad reaction between Abilify and what's that you take to keep from getting an infection?
Antibiotic.
Thank you.
Oh,
Yeah. So the antibiotic interacted with the Abilify in a really bad way. It caused her whole body to contract, and her mind just went bananas, like that. And prior to that, she was just sort of tripping out and didn't remember things and didn't understand things. And so I was going with her to her psychiatrist, and I would describe, kind of what's going on with her, and he would make an adjustment to her medications, and it would change things, sometimes not necessarily for the better, sometimes for the worse. So, if I had it to do over, I would definitely want to ask the psychiatrist, can we please start over? Can we please get my mom back to her normal?
Right, take her off.
And then start over, because.
But then, so that was, Donna, my late partner, was diagnosed with dementia of a different kind, and they're always chasing because she also had dysautonomia, so where the autonomic system is shutting down every so often and different things stop working, right? So you're always they were always chasing the symptoms and giving her this cocktail of stuff. Everything affected her terribly. Yeah. So she was very sensitive to meds, and so it was. It's tough when there's a troublesome symptom that's causing pain or causing discomfort, or whatever, and then you react to that. To the medication that's for that,
and then they give you another medication to counteract
your
that.
brain down as well.
It's nuts. But I would, just from my experience, I would definitely recommend that anybody that's going to see a psychiatrist should have an advocate with them who knows them really well, who can actually report to the doctor on their behalf. Because when your mind isn't working right, how can you accurately report to the doctor? And so they're going to the doctor by themselves and getting medicated, and the doctor doesn't really know they're normal.
Did you need some kind of special status, or have to sort of, in order to be that person who can go to the doctor with them, did you have to have power of attorney? Did you have to have...
I did have power of attorney from my mom. Yeah.
So that you would have to sort of establish that relationship.
I had a folder with the documents I had to take to the hospital. She'd get moved to different hospitals, and so I always had to have that.
There are those
with
forms they give you to sign if you're going to make decisions for the patient, then they give you those things.
Yeah.
And we have a caller. Caller, you're on the air. What's your name, please?
Hi, this is Gail.
Hey, Gail.
How are you?
Good morning.
Shelley, every spot on, every point, and I really appreciate what you went through and your being there for your dad and your mom.
Well, thank you.
I was actually just going to emphasize exactly what you said while I was on hold, which is nothing really beats having an advocate.
Yeah.
Somebody who, I look out at the sea of older people and I just imagine the side effects and the medication errors and stuff that's just brushed off to just getting older or just having a dementia. And it's heartbreaking. It's really shocking.
Yeah.
What the medication's done to Stephen is really very, very sad.
Yes.
Wake up, Stevie.
Yeah. But
You're in the studio A. Anyway, sorry, Gail.
Well, one thing that I wanted to sort of add is a lot of what Shelley's been talking about, which is if you believe that someone has a dementia, or if you feel that your things, that your thinking is changing, that the very first, people sometimes are so afraid to go to the doctor, or they're they just resign themselves or whatever, getting off your medicines, making sure that you're not mixing up your medications, because sometimes older people, the pills are small and the bottles are hard to read, and they might be overdoing it. There is just the most basic lab tests. Someone who could be on water pills could have a low potassium, or somebody whose thyroid could be, gradually getting worse, and those are so easily correctable. And yet, again, if nobody asks the question, these are people who refuse to go to the doctor, refuse to have the test, and sometimes that can be really frustrating. too many medicines, the wrong medicines.
Yeah, so sometimes signs of
low-grade bladder infection can change, your mental status, and nobody, who, if you don't have pain like a woman might have, the typical symptoms, it can be totally missed, and those are treatable.
Huh. Interesting. So there are signs that of what we think might be dementia, but it's actually a symptom of some other less serious affliction.
Well, treatable is really the key word. And then, again, just the same thing. Stephen's mom had a cough, and so they gave her some strong cough syrup, and then she had trouble sleeping, so they gave her another medicine. She was anxious, and then we would call up the doctors and get her off all the medicines, and then gradually she'd have a complaint, and they would just phone in another prescription.
Right.
It takes constant.
You got to.
You've taken care of it, and you look up and it's back again.
That's all part of the caregiving dilemma, right? I mean, you're trying to do the best for whoever's in your care, and the experts are telling you certain things, and others.
We're taught to listen to our doctors as well.
Yeah.
And, useful if you have the right doctor. I mean, there are gerontologists, there are incredible doctors, but you definitely need to be involved. The thing about the medications, like what you talked about with your mom, now there are some fairly simple genetic tests that you can get, which look at how you metabolize a whole variety of those medications, psych meds in particular, but lots of medications. And you can actually see, to some degree, who's a fast or slow metabolizer of certain medications and who, certain mixtures, if we don't have the enzymes, depending on how the enzymes are in our, our own unique thing, and that's something that's really coming up, and so I think that there hopefully will be a lot more elucidation, a lot more less trial and error.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I have a broader question, Gail, maybe other people can comment on it. I was thinking about it as I was driving down the road to Point Reyes today, which is that all of these things, in some sense, are a replacement for other human beings. In many cases,
what do you mean?
Well, these small bits of medicine for care is replacing the caregivers,
family.
Yeah, the presence of other people in your life,
interaction with other people.
Interaction, I think, certainly for mental health, but also in terms of physical health. When you have a cold and you have this, you have that. If there are other people there who are looking after you,
right.
The medication is, in essence, to stand in place of a person, a family member, a caregiver, or whatever.
Interesting.
We're all off.
Exactly. And the other thing is that sometimes a person has a dementia, and we tend to say, okay, well, they're just getting older, it's just getting worse. But make sure their hearing is okay. Make sure they don't have a low-grade infection. Their nutrition can be compromised. I mean, so there's a lot of things that can, optimize their care rather than just write it all off to the dementia.
I agree.
Can you speak to about again this relationship if you're an adult child? Well, I mean that's a loaded question, Wes Marin. If you are if you're an adult,
I don't know any of those people.
If you're an adult and you've got a parent, who you're trying to help sort of navigate their relationship with doctors and medicine. Things that maybe people should know about, establishing a good relationship with the physicians and the people who are looking after, this person who has dementia? That's maybe too broad.
I can say one thing about it, which is, my mom loved her doctor, and he was absolutely disinterested. She would go in and he'd say, "How are you?" She'd say, "Fine," and he'd say, "Great."
Right, yeah, of course.
It was a perfect relationship.
Thank you. See you next time.
And, denial worked really well for her for a very long time. But, it wasn't, so we really had to go do a little more research and find someone with some expertise and some affinity for caring for older people because they really do have not only a different set of problems, but they also take more time. It's a different practice.
Mm-hmm.
You have to have the network within your practice that supports that. And so not every, some amazing internists and family practice docs, et cetera, but there are gerontologists, and sometimes it's worth making a switch, and that's the same thing. I think people wait way too long to take charge for their parents.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
When you do it, it's almost always some sort of a relief for them. It's not like they don't know, and they're not scared and all that. Oh, my God, but I just think about the things that happened in those last month or year of, trying to let them remain independent when, oh my God, things are just going bad.
I know. I take care of my dad. He lives with me, and we've always had a good relationship, so I could do that. But my mom, I had a very strained relationship with, and so I really didn't want to have to be with her that much. It's really awful to say that, but it's true. And so I had to come up with tricks to be able to take care of her without having to be there all the time. I would give her meds in the morning, and then I would hide her evening meds somewhere in the house. And then after work, I would call her up and tell her where to go find her pills. That way I only had to be there once a day.
Like a little game.
Yeah. A friend of mine thought of it. I thought it was brilliant.
It's brilliant. But then the other is, of course, that, when in other words, my mom took care of my dad.
Yeah.
We're taking care of my mom.
Yeah.
And, in other words, he had the luxury of her going every day and making sure his laundry was clean and, keeping an eye on things and calling us if there was a problem.
Yeah.
Stay with us, Gail.
Yeah,
I'm just going to do a little break.
Okay, good.
This is KWMR, 90.5 Point Rate Station, 89.9 Bolinas, and 92.3 San Geronimo Valley, and on KWMR.org. And programming is underwritten by our listeners and by the Palace Market in downtown Point Reyes Station, offering produce, cheeses, wines, a full deli and meat department, and an assortment of natural health foods and supplements. Also by the Point Reyes Light, an independent and locally owned newspaper telling West Marin's stories since 1948, featuring award-winning reporting, essays, opinions, a community events calendar, and the sheriff's calls. Office and newsroom open Monday through Thursday in downtown Inverness. Subscription, classifieds, calendar, and advertising information, plus letter to the editor forms are available at ptreyeslight.com. That's PTREYES light.com, or at 415-669-1200. And also by To Celebrate Life Breast Cancer Foundation, raising funds to help underserved women and men living with breast cancer. Through its Bay Area Breast Cancer Grants program, the foundation supports nonprofits that provide direct and emergency services and believes that no one should face breast cancer alone. Information about how to get involved is available at tocelebratelife.org. This is Let's Talk, and we're talking about dementia and its treatments and the trials of caregiving, etc., etc. Give us a call. We have a line open, 415-663-8317. Gail is on the line. And Gail, what got me thinking about this, apart from Shelley talking a little bit about her father last week, was I saw an article about these dementia villages that are being built.
Love those.
Yeah. I know some of them. Inverness Park, Inverness, Olema. Anyway, tell me more. What about these dementias?
Well, they're large.
Nice.
It's like a little enclosed
acres
town.
of development that's all enclosed. There's only one door that is locked and is open to the outside world, but inside it's like a village. It's like a little
town.
Disneyland, a little town with and they're doing them with 50s and 60s storefronts and signage to appeal to people who are in their 80s now, who grew up during that time and are familiar with that. They say that it's a good way for them to feel safe, and because you still have long-term memory when you have Alzheimer's anyway. They remember the feel of a village, of a town like that.
Nice.
They're free to go everywhere within the town, and the whole town is staffed. The supermarket checkout lady is a trained caregiver.
Oh.
And
Yeah, they
when
don't have
family
to worry about money or
and
anything.
children, grandchildren come to visit, grandma and granddad are more inclined to talk about things that are in the town because it feels like, look, this is how this was. It
probably really helps them to feel normal.
Right.
too.
I think it's an interesting approach. It's called reminiscence therapy, I think.
I thought it was
Sounds
called The
lovely.
Truman Show.
Well,
That's
exactly.
what
So
occurred to
here's the
me.
thing: it's like a Disney town. It's like Disneyland for Alzheimer's, right?
Yeah.
I mean, is that a good thing?
Well, my dad, when he was still living on his own, his day was get up, get in the car, go for a drive, and pat yourself on the back that you found your way home again. He was just always checking to see if he could remember how to get places. And then going to the fast food place where everyone knew him, kind of like Cheers. Oh, Ken, you want the taquitos? Biscuits and gravy? And then he'd go up the road to the doctor and get a blood pressure check, even though he didn't need to go every day. And nobody ever called me. I was like so surprised that they didn't say, "Did you know your dad is coming like every day?" So a big thing with people with dementia is losing their driving.
Yeah.
And so
Taking the keys away.
with my mom, I didn't know a lot of the things I know now. With my mom, I actually said, "I'm sorry, Mom, I took the keys, you can't drive." And of course, all her anger went directed at
Sure,
me
of
in a
course.
big, powerful way.
Yeah.
And I actually even tried to let her drive one time. She was so insistent that she could do it, and I said, "I'll let you drive the car. I'll ride with you, but I will not help you." This was my theory, that I could prove to her, that she wasn't capable. And of course, she couldn't go get gas. She went to 2 gas stations, couldn't figure it out, was asking other people to help her. So we went back to taking the keys away, and she went back to being angry with me. Well,
Sure.
with my dad, we went through a whole different, long, drawn-out process of him having to go take the special DMV test, which means you go and do the eye check, you do the written exam, then you go and you sit down with a special DMV person and have a conversation about driving.
Really? And why? And what triggers that? Is it an age thing, or is it because there's a report from a doctor or something?
I think in my dad's case, it was a couple of tickets that he got kind of landed him in there having to do that.
Yeah.
And then finally, it was letters because he kept passing the test, like repeatedly. And even if he failed it, they'd let him take it again, and then he'd pass.
Wow.
So finally, we did get letters from doctors.
Right.
I wrote a letter.
Right. You
And,
can still just ask. People don't actually realize that you actually can tell the doctor, and
Yeah.
the doctor will do it, and then you don't have to go through the emotional turmoil at least.
Right, and they don't have to blame you.
Right,
Exactly.
and that's
Yeah.
really worthwhile.
It's huge. Yeah.
Yeah, let's talk about loss of mobility. Wow. In America.
Yeah.
Ooh.
It's all. I mean, even the things like I love the reminiscent therapy. I think that people, can really benefit by home-like, safe environments where they have as much freedom as possible without really being dangerous
And there's one...
for others. I think we also have to deal with the cost at some point.
right.
I mean, even reasonable care for elderly people, can be $8,000 a month. I mean,
Right.
do the math. That's a lot of money.
Well, there's one.
Yeah.
This one that caught my eye was the one in San Diego that's opening this year, which is It's just a daycare,
Oh, nice. Okay.
and you pay. I think they said $90 a day to be there, or $60 for a half day, and you can take your patient there, and it is another reminiscence therapy town square, and it's all, again, 50s and 60s storefronts. And
Is there one where you can relive the Vietnam War? Or
It really was
dear.
protesting. I want to just go back to college,
and we have another caller. Caller, you're on the air. What's your name, please?
This is Sally.
Hey, Sally.
Good morning. This is such a stellar show, so very crucial and informative. Thank you guys so much for doing this. I think, well, I'm actually now of the generation where someone's going to have to take care of me. Okay, so
Uh-oh.
I'm not. My parents left pretty young. They both died in their early mid-70s. My mother of a huge stroke, and my father of cancer. And so I'm thinking about how I talk to my kids, who are adult
Good one.
kids and very sweet, but they may be clueless about all this, because they're young and they're living their lives. So I kind of have been thinking a lot about how I want to prepare them for whatever my elder care issues may be, should I live so long to really be an actual elder, although I did receive the senior discount without asking at the Palace Market. It was a humbling experience, as I am not actually technically a senior yet.
Don't turn it down now.
No, I didn't understand what it was. But anyway, so I just thought,
maybe we should know about it.
Oh, that special item is on sale, and I didn't know it.
It's okay. They give it to me. I just bring a walker.
How do we prepare our kids? And I think the big thing is patience and compassion and an understanding of advocacy. As Gail said, the advocacy is the most crucial thing. So how do you set that up? And is there some way to train? I wonder if there's a training in place, some kind of protocol for people who have to take care of their elders in this very complicated regard.
Well, in terms of Alzheimer's, there's the Alzheimer's Association, and they're exceptionally supportive of people who have a family member with Alzheimer's. They have support groups. They have written information about how to communicate with people with Alzheimer's. When I first moved my dad up to Point Reyes from Long Beach, of course, all he wanted to do was go home. I actually ended up in sheriff's calls one time because he called the sheriff because I said, well, we can't go home. It's 3 in the afternoon and it's an 8-hour drive. Well, reasoning is not something that works with people with dementia, and because they have their own reality. And when you tell them, oh, no, that's not true, this is true, all it does is make them angry and disturbed. It doesn't make sense. So,
but you say like simple pleasures and things like that. I was thinking, that eating and things, any kind of like simple enjoyment, those things are not as present. I mean, for them, or they're not.
Sometimes more present.
More, so you're just finding things people can engage with that are, to distract them from this kind of disorientation, or
it's not linear.
Well, I think we've really learned through trial and error, and starting with the information the Alzheimer's Association puts forth, it gives you a basic concept of how to communicate with somebody with short-term memory loss, dementia. But then you have to put it into practice, and that's when you really learn what works. With my dad, we've noticed a correlation between his behavior or what words work for him and how you would talk to a toddler. So, in other words, if he picks up a pair of scissors and starts to try to cut something up that really shouldn't be cut up, he does not want us to say, no, don't do that, stop. He needs to hear, here, let me give you this paper to cut instead. Or, so instead of saying, no, don't do that, you say, hey, do this. That's what you do with toddlers. If you want to.
So many different things that it's hard to say that there's one exact thing to do. But in the place where my mom stays, one of the nurses, she said the same thing. Like, my mom thought somebody was coming into her room and stealing her stuff, like just moving things around.
Yeah.
Even though they weren't. I mean, we checked. And she said, you can't just say, no, they're not, because she gets more and more agitated.
Exactly.
But if you can say, that sounds really serious, I'll make sure I check on that, or we'll do what we have.
You validate them.
They're like, thank you.
Yes, validate. I've learned with my dad that the go-to answer to almost everything he asks is yes.
Exactly.
Yes.
I want that.
Yes, that is great. That's a good, like he'll say, oh, can we go to the bank? And I'll say, Yes, even though it's closed today.
Right, exactly.
And then he's happy.
Yeah.
He just wants to know that,
All we need.
You will agree with him, that you'll do what... Yeah.
He had a request and he got it.
Yeah.
So is there a training program anywhere do you know of?
I think the Alzheimer's Association does offer
do?
workshops.
Can I add something?
Yes.
Is that, I forgot what I was going to say. The training, one of the things that we ran into, this is such an incredible conversation. I'd love to add a couple of things, but I don't want to take it off track, but they seem all so important. But, when we had to deal with my mom, the financial aspect was insane. Every single, I literally actually took out a website, but I don't have this service, but just Care and Prepare for Aging Parents, because it is horrifying to see what your parents are going through, knowing that there may be a time when you're in a similar position. So for my mom, for instance, she was eligible for a fairly significant veterans benefit because my dad had been in the military, but nobody told us about it. We just sort of randomly found out about it, and literally we had a lawyer. It took us 15 months of multiple applications. Now you have to have under a certain income, and the spouse has to have been or the person has to have been in the military. But you know what? It's $1,000 a month that goes for daycare or assisted, an assistant, and that made the difference in her being able to stay in a place of our choosing in some ways. And every single state has different rules. If your family can put their house into a trust, it will protect it. It has to be 5 years ahead. So you have to really be planning for your retirement, planning for any potential illness or medical need in advance, to really understand how the finances work and how to protect them. And like I said, every single state has a different set of rules. There is not one central location where you can find out. Every single person says, talk to an elder attorney. It's like you can't talk to an elder attorney just to find out if they're covered or not. The policies are...
So each state is different.
Exactly. Each state is different and badly different. You would be amazed at the things that they pick on and that they use. And like in California, you cannot get any financial assistance for assisted living. And when your money runs out, you must go to a skilled nursing facility. So now you've got someone who may be stable and cared for, but the money is gone, boom. They have to go to this other facility. In Florida, they can get aid for both. It's shocking, really, and it's not until you're involved that you realize the extent of the breakdown of the system.
Prepare.
So preparing us in our age group right now to understand the systems and to secure some finances and whatever.
And then tell our children.
And then, work with your children. Like my parents dropped their long-term care insurance because they didn't want to pay for it. My brother and I went insane. It's like that you actually think you're going to be paid, that this affects you, Well,
apparently. People go into denial. People are very proud, and, we all essentially think, we're in denial about our own mortality and everything.
But we're talking about it, being prepared. They could have thought they were, a little bit.
I know. It's frightening, and we're also, especially in our culture, we're so attached to autonomy, the concept of, it's being raised with the myth of the Western.
Maybe.
Well, aren't there ways to lower the likelihood that you will get dementia?
I'm going
to jump off. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Sally. Thank you, Sally.
We're talking as if it's inevitable.
Right. Please tell me if I'm talking too much, but this is something I wanted to bring up.
No, Gil, thank you.
Somebody had suggested, the question about whether it's appropriate to get the ApoE gene testing. You can get that for less than $100, as part of 23andMe, and there are other services as well. It is useful to know because if you have the ApoE, if you have one copy of the ApoE4, you have, I think, an 18% higher chance of a tendency to late dementia. If you have two copies, you have, I think, as much as a 50% increase in the chance that you will develop a late-onset dementia. And if you don't have that particular gene, I mean, obviously there's a lot that's spontaneous that we don't know about. The reason why it's useful to know, other than obviously planning, and obviously it's not intended to make people frightened, but there's genetics, which is about 10% predicted, whether you have a tendency to have heart disease or dementia or whatever. But then there's about 90%, which comes from lifestyle and from other interventions that can, in fact, change the way those genes are expressed. Like, not everybody who has a genetic tendency to diabetes gets diabetes, but the people who eat poorly or whatever, have a higher risk for that, and it may be, that it's expressed. But in any case, there's a book that came out recently called The End of Alzheimer's by a Dr. Dale Bredesen, who's got about a decade of research and some pretty impressive statistics on his ability to prevent and actually reverse cognitive decline, particularly, if it's found at an earlier stage. And it's a pretty extensive program involving, both the usual nutrition and managing your stress and getting enough sleep and exercise. But it also goes into a pretty extensive testing to look if you've got inflammation or exposure to toxins and if you have the genetic tendency, and then to make recommendations, very specifically depending on the individual. And I think that there's a real sea change in healthcare, much more looking for, the dementia or many of these chronic illnesses are the effect of multiple effects over the course of our lifestyle, over the course of our lifespan. It isn't a disease where there's one beta tau and you take this pill and it's going to be all better. It's many, many, many things that have gone awry that in the right individual have led to this changes in their brain, the shrinking of their brain, the vascular changes, all the different things that translate into a dementia as we age. And it's an amazing book, really. And it's frightening and it's exciting and everything, to be at a time in history where there really is more hope than we've ever been able to offer for this, in the past. And definitely worth looking into and definitely worth keeping an eye on, as this, now they're doing a huge study at the Cleveland Clinic. I think the results will be out in a year. And
so this is
pretty encouraging, really.
What was the name of the book again?
The End of Alzheimer's.
The End of Alzheimer's.
And it's by Dale Bredesen, Bredesen, MD.
And he's works at Buck Institute
Center and at UCLA.
Yeah.
Well, I thank you, Gail. And also, just to come back to the social aspect of it, is just, I like hanging out with old people because they know things. Mm-hmm. Whereas people seem to, in our culture, probably because of our education system, segregate by age. So, and, I was at a party, sort of Christmas party in Marshall a couple of weeks back where we had our 80-year-old and we had our 1-year-old toddler and everybody in between. And there was such a calm that kind of comes over a social setting there where you've got a toddler and you've got, all the other ages. And a lot of times I come into sort of settings, certainly a place like West Marin, where it's all age graded and it feels really artificial. It feels really cold and weird. And I think people, instead of paying, $8,000 a month for all, they should pay their grandchildren to come out here to West Marin and hang out with them. And if you don't have any grandchildren, you can call me. I'll come hang out with you. You got to be kind of interesting.
Surrogate grandchild.
Well,
Charles Schultz.
That's right. But I just, it seems like as you say, Sally was saying, this emphasis on autonomy and independence and whatever, that's so true. She's so right about that. But I'd love it just if there was a kind of more of a sort of functioning social dynamic in which people saw more of each other and we had more complexity in terms of who's hanging out with whom. Getting different stages of life, getting everybody together, because I think it creates a much sort of healthier picture in terms of how we socially deal with the inevitable decline, for ultimately inevitable decline.
I agree.
And the younger generation isn't benefiting from learning from their parents and their grandparents, frankly, which I think is really unfortunate. And they just hang out with other people their own age who are idiots as well. And so they get dumber collectively. So go hang out with your grandparents. That's my message for
Nice.
Is your mom still in town?
Yes, I've been seeking power of attorney over for years, so I can have her. This is early. I want to have her committed early so that I can deal with these dementia issues maybe many decades before they actually manifest. Preemptive. Is it my mother here?
She's right there.
Okay. That's great. That's great. You heard it here first, Mom. They're coming to get you. But anyway, sorry, Gail, to interrupt with that.
No, please. I mean, I think we see more that you alluded to it in the beginning, the breakdown of a social structure. When my dad originally had dementia, and my mom, it was so sad. I mean, imagine her cutting the food of this man she's been married to for 50-plus years. And her brother, my uncle, bought the apartment next door to them. And I watched them change from, my mom just drowning, doing everything to care for her husband, and to, like, 4 people having dinner, and my dad had dementia. Just one of the people at the table. I mean, he didn't have to make sense or do anything in particular. It was really a gift, a mitzvah, as they say.
That's lovely.
Yeah.
That's the way it should be.
Yeah.
But we are an atomized culture.
I think it's important. There's a fear of the elderly. There's a fear of infirmity, but also there's very little respect for wisdom. People need to, maybe a topic for another show, but how much wisdom and experience is just neglected, as though it could be replaced by an app or a robot is going to. Or I don't know what it is people think they'll derive sort of wisdom or insight from. But I feel that go talk to your neighbors, Westmoreland. And grandchildren, come visit.
Have more parties.
Maybe partying will help. We haven't talked about that.
So, and then there's the how do you know when you are getting what are the signs? There was a little email from Mark Dowie saying, "Great."
You mean your self-assessment?
Yeah, he said he pointed out there are 61 known dementias.
There are more people than that.
But the example is, losing your keys is not an indication of dementia. Finding them and not knowing what they are for is.
Oh, good point.
61 forms of dementia. I just think there are more people than that in Inverness Park, Mark.
I remember that with my mom. What we noticed was that everything in her apartment was breaking. That was how she reported it. Oh, my TV doesn't work. Things weren't working. And we would come to fix them and discover, they work just fine. She just didn't remember.
How to do it.
Right.
Yeah.
So that was a clue.
I remember going to my mom's house and trying to, straighten things out for her. And I could see she wouldn't say anything, but she'd get agitated. And then I realized, she has a system, how she checks her phone and she checks her keys and she checks her house and she does this every time she goes in or out, because that's how she has compensated.
Right. The familiarity, the ritual.
My moving it was not a help.
Yeah. Well, I agree. And at the same time, somebody suggested to me something like rearranging the furniture actually stimulates the brain. That it may cause a difficulty at first for the person, but that because they're having to learn a new system, it actually does help.
Right, which goes back to what you said originally, which is it really is an individual. You have to just be completely dancing with it all the time.
Yeah, and you can't ask them for permission.
Right.
Because they'll say no.
That's interesting, because thinking about my mom, I would think if she were confronted by the sofa being in a different place, she would just be
unhappy.
Yeah. Well, it's
Don't
true.
staple it to the ceiling. I mean,
but
what Paul did was really cruel.
If she's got dementia, it won't take too long before that's the new normal. That it's not an issue anymore. But at first, definitely.
As long as she doesn't fall over. And the last thing here. Thank you, everyone. Gail, thank you very much for calling in. That was very informative.
Thank you, Gail.
And there was a statistic I saw. 1/3 of the people being born today, this is in the UK, but I'm guessing it's globally, will have dementia when they get older. Unless there is this new thing about reversing cognitive decline and doing genetic testing and all that kind of stuff. Thank you. Thank you, Stephen. Thank you, Shelley. Thank you, Charles.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you, Paul.
And we'll be back next Thursday with something else. Who knows what it might be, but
See you then.
you know.
Health